Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. What does it take to keep a long-term relationship alive and well? Tiffany and Trey came to see me because they want to stay together but keep repeating a cycle of splitting up and getting back together. It's gone on like that for 3 years. They clearly love each other and they tell me they have an active sex life when they're together, but they can't manage to stay together for more than a year or so before one or the other calls it quits. Then, within a few weeks, or at most a few months, they get back together and the cycle repeats. This has happened 4 times now. What gives? Doris and Ken came to see me because they also want to stay together, but their story is very different. They've been married for 35 years and have 4 adult kids and 7 grandchildren. What brought them to therapy is that Ken found out that Doris had been texting with an old high school boyfriend, and the texts had gone from newsy to emotional to frankly sexual over the course of a few weeks. Doris insists there's been no physical contact with the old boyfriend. He lives far away, and Ken is pretty sure he believes her, although there was at least one opportunity he knows of when they could have been together. But this event has shaken both of them. Ken, because he had never before doubted that Doris was faithful, and Doris because she wouldn't have thought herself capable of straying even as much as she did. They also clearly love each other, and a year ago, they both would have said they have a basically solid marriage. What gives? Though there are endless variations, Tiffany and Trey, and Doris and Ken can serve to illustrate the 2 golden gifts you need to develop for a long-term relationship to survive and thrive. I mean the kind of gifts we refer to when we talk about someone who's become highly skilled at something. You need some basic talent, but then you need to develop your talent into skill and mastery. So, what are the 2 golden gifts? Let's call them stability and intimacy. You need to get good at both of them if you want your relationship to work. And the funny thing about the 2 gifts is that sometimes they work together, but sometimes they conflict. Your work to develop one makes it harder to hang on to the other, which is why long-term relationships can be so challenging to maintain. Stability is the gift that Tiffany and Trey were having problems with. Stability skills are all about building a sense of confidence in each other and in the relationship. You come to know what helps your partner feel good, and you learn how to comfort them when they're upset or sad. You show up when you're needed. You do your part to keep the bills paid and the house in decent order, and the kids picked up and dropped off. Of course, a fundamental stability skill is to foster trust that neither you nor your partner will be violent or use threats of violence or other forms of coercive control to intimidate each other. Sexual fidelity is another basic stability skill. You don't cheat, and you behave in ways that reassure your partner that you won't cheat. But more generally, the gift of stability is about a sense that you can count on each other to hang in there. You develop a basic assumption of goodwill. In other words, you're pretty sure your partner isn't trying to make you suffer even when they do something that bothers you, and that they really do want to be with you even when they're upset with you. Tiffany and Trey's cycle arose because they lacked that basic assumption of goodwill. They had each grown up in households with unstable relationships in which arguments were frequent, volatile, and rarely seemed to result in reconciliation. They were powerfully attracted to each other, but whenever a difference arose, it would escalate into a chain of accusations and counter-accusations that just reinforced their view that the other didn't care about them, that they're just not on the same team. Though it never got to the point of physical violence, their arguments would often lead one or the other to declare that the relationship was over. The more these arguments happened between them, the less they trusted each other's goodwill. So they would split up, and often one or both would quickly enter into another relationship, which wouldn't last, not surprisingly, because Trey and Tiffany still felt deeply connected to each other, and they'd get back together again. And the cycle would repeat, not only because the same triggers were still present, but also because now they couldn't trust each other's fidelity. Essentially, stability skills are all about lowering anxiety, both your own and your partner's. Neither Tiffany nor Trey had grown up seeing adults do that very often, and they had never learned how to calm themselves or each other when they needed to. So the relationship couldn't weather the storms. Ken and Doris had stability skills pretty much down pat. They had their issues with each other early on, but over the decades of their marriage, they had learned to steer clear of the hot spots. They worked out their differences about money, raising the kids, and household tasks effectively, which wasn't that difficult because they lined up pretty well on their mutual expectations. They had had a comfortable sex life in earlier years, though more recently it had mostly disappeared, which, if they thought of it at all, they chalk up to the normal course of a long marriage. So why did Doris end up threatening that stable, comfortable relationship with her texting? In some ways, she was as shocked as Ken was that she let it happen. But as we talked about it in therapy, she began to understand what made the lure of her old boyfriend's interest so compelling. When she reconnected with her old boyfriend, she felt herself come alive in ways she hadn't felt in years, ways she had thought were long gone. She realized how risky her continued texting was to her marriage, but kept doing it anyway. And it wasn't until Ken found out about it, which in hindsight happened because she was all but screaming to be caught, that she realized her fascination wasn't about the old boyfriend or even about deficiencies in Ken. She realized she had been shutting down parts of herself for decades, rather than risk the stability of her marriage. What Doris hungered for was intimacy, the experience of being emotionally present and honest with someone else doing the same. And she came to realize she hadn't had much of that in her marriage for a very long time. As I noted earlier, stability skills are all about lowering anxiety. You behave in ways that reassure yourself and your partner, and you avoid doing things that might increase anxiety. Doris and Ken had learned early on, sometimes painfully, what their limits were, and their solid marriage was testimony to their effectiveness at respecting those limits. But intimacy requires a very different set of skills. Intimacy skills aren't about lowering anxiety. Rather, intimacy requires that you tolerate and sometimes even raise anxiety. To risk genuine emotional honesty and to be open to someone else's honesty is often scary. And the more important that someone else is to you, the scarier intimacy can be. One of the ironies of intimacy is that it's often far easier to be intimate with someone who's not particularly important to you than it is with your partner with whom you're trying to build a stable life. That's why the pull of an affair can be so powerful. It gives free rein to your desire for intimacy since by definition you're not trying to build a life with an affair partner. What Doris and Ken had learned to do was to avoid anything that might threaten their stability. Sometimes this meant giving up what they wanted for the sake of peace, which is fine unless what they're giving up is actually important to who they are. Without realizing it, Doris had been suppressing some important aspects of herself because she sensed that they made Ken uneasy. A lot of the work of therapy was to help each of them get hold of themselves and risk the anxiety of intimacy with each other. Well, what happened to Tiffany and Trey and Doris and Ken? Since both couples are composites of hundreds of couples I've worked with, hey, you didn't think I'd use confidential details from real people, did you? I could come up with a lot of different endings. For couples like Tiffany and Trey, if they can develop the gift of stability skills, they have a chance of staying together, and I've often seen that happen. That means rediscovering the basic assumption of goodwill so they can learn to calm themselves and each other enough to work through differences. I've also seen couples break up when one or both discover that their trust just won't recover enough for the relationship to be stable. For couples like Doris and Ken, when they can learn to risk intimacy, they can often get past the crisis that brought them to therapy and find that their relationship deepens to a level of fulfillment they hadn't known before. In fact, a lot of couples have expressed gratitude for the crisis, precisely because it forced that kind of growth. I've also seen a lot of couples come to realize that they can't stay together without sacrificing too much of who they are. So, which kind of couple are you? Almost certainly some of both. And regardless of which kind of issues predominate, if you want your relationship both to survive and to thrive, you need to develop both of the golden gifts of stability and intimacy. Therapy can help you get there if you can handle it. The next step is up to you. I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. Drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.